Are you thinking about opening a bank account offshore? If the answer to that question is yes, then stay tuned because I'm gonna tell you how. Hi, my name is Rosudan. I have been working with Nomad Capitalist for 3 years, and my responsibility is making sure that our financial infrastructure is set up correctly. This is something that we have been helping with our clients as well, and helping them reduce their tax, get second citizenships, and go where you're treated best. In this video, I'm going to tell you about what is offshore banking, how to set it up for yourself, what kind of advantages you can expect from this experience, and also certain drawbacks that you need to be prepared for. The first question is, what is offshore banking? Offshore banking is when you bank in the country that is different from your own resident country. Why do people choose going offshore with banking? The answer to that question is pretty simple, because it provides you better asset protection, access to international markets, also diversification of your assets, and in certain cases, opportunities for tax optimization. We will talk about that a bit later. Now let's talk about historical offshore banking and the modern offshore banking. So I think that in lots of movies, you have seen people with suitcases move around and go to certain locations and offshore islands where they just deposit their money or put it in the safe there or something like that. It's, I would say, no longer like that, but the idea still stands. So offshore banking provides you better asset protection and diversification. So that's why it still has maintained its advantage and its attractiveness to entrepreneurs worldwide. However, it did go through a certain improvement and evolution, and it's in a way that it's more diverse right now, and it also is more accessible. In certain cases, open offshore banks in remotely, and it is more flexible, and it also provides better infrastructure and better services than before. One other thing that we need to talk about is also benefits of offshore banking. Let's delve into more detail on that. So the first thing that you're getting with offshore banking is asset protection. Basically, you are in one country and you also need to pay attention to what's happening in your country. But if you have certain assets in another country, in another bank account, it means that you are mitigating the risks of anything happening in your country and making sure that those do not affect negatively your bank accounts. So this is the first layer of protection for you. Another benefit to having an offshore bank account is also access to international markets. For example, in certain countries you can have a certain currencies, but if your currency is not very stable, you can go to another country where you can have access to more currencies and hedge risks there by holding more stable currency in the offshore bank. One other thing is also the benefit is tax optimization. By having an offshore bank in a country where it provides tax benefits, you are also making sure that your overall portfolio and tax bill is optimized. This is something that may not be the first thing that comes to your mind when you're talking about offshore banking, but one of the biggest advantages is the privacy and confidentiality that certain offshore banks provide. So in some countries, it's strictly regulated that the bank cannot disclose certain information about the customer and the account held there. And by certain information, and I do not only mean the account number or more detailed information, but also the fact of the existence of the account. So there are countries where they do not even say if the account exists with their banking system. And I think that in certain situations builds more trustworthy communication with the bank and gives you certainty that your assets are protected with the bank. Another thing that offshore banking helps you structure better is your portfolio, because with international offshore banking, you can get access to better interest rates or better overall term deposit rates that you can enjoy. It is something that I've seen lots of people really use to their advantage, and not only for the asset protection wise, but also making sure that your money is making you more money. As with everything else, there are some drawbacks to having offshore bank account. The first thing that comes to mind is more reporting requirements that you may face. For example, there are certain countries or certain regulations where you may be required to disclose that you own a bank account in another jurisdiction. Or maybe that jurisdiction that you're banking with also has some declaration requirements for you to follow, maybe a bit of additional paperwork that you need to fill out. So in certain situations, it may be a bit more expensive to establish a bank account offshore than in your own jurisdiction. And that can be due to the overall service fee that the bank charges, and also the one-time documents that you have to gather and all the information that you have to provide to the bank, and sometimes things need to be translated and notarized. You may be required to travel there because not every bank can be opened remotely. So these are also like small costs, but it does add to some certain sums. Another drawback can be the complexity of the process with the account opening. Like I've seen bank accounts that need to be open, need to like 6 months to be opened. And this means that you go through the whole process, you provide all the documents, and then they are reviewing it for 6 months when they are coming back to you with questions related to different things like where is the money coming from, what's the additional document, how does your business work, and like lots of different questions that you have to answer. So overall, like 6 months, it's a long time to work on getting just one business account or personal account. So it can be rather complex, especially when you are taking into consideration different jurisdictions. So one thing that you also have to think about is how does the bank country treat your country, because if you're a resident of a certain country, maybe the country is gray listed or it's considered a bit of a higher risk country, so maybe you will be required to provide, let's say, a higher minimum deposit or a balance for the account so that they can approve it, or maybe just they will altogether say no. Or on the contrary, you are coming from a country that doesn't have any issues with the banking country, so you're good with that. But these are nuances that you have to think about before starting on this journey. Yeah, one other thing, and I can also say that this is a drawback, but also kind of like a myth that we need to debunk, is that offshore banking may be considered, maybe like associated with more legal risks, and that is coming from a place where people hear offshore and they think that it's like illegal, which it's not. We have established that, but it does mean that you maybe ask a lot more questions, let's say in your like original country, like why do we have this account there, or provide additional documents, etc. So these are things that you have to be ready for in regards to certain drawbacks that you may face while opening a bank account offshore. When you're considering going offshore for your banking services, there are certain countries that immediately come to your mind. The first one is, let's say, Singapore. And Singapore is a very huge financial hub. It has a very good reputation. It has a trustworthy banking system and overall financial system altogether. So it's very advisable to bank there. Of course, it depends on your situation and lots of other things, but it's a very good, reputable jurisdiction for you to bank. Another country that comes to mind is also Hong Kong. And because of Hong Kong's general ease of doing business and tax regimes that are very attractive for offshore businesses, not a surprise that they also offer good banking opportunities, because you need to have banking for good business structures. We can also talk about Switzerland as the country that is more traditional in banking, like hundreds of years of history of trustworthy bank system and security and confidentiality. And even though they do maybe follow the steps of being a bit more strict with certain things, and maybe they are asked to provide a bit more information than previously, and they are not like super 100% private and confidential with your information, they still maintain a certain level of confidentiality and definitely a very good level of trust from the customer. So definitely a good option to think about. And it really depends also on what's your goal. Like, do you need a transactional bank account or something like a wealth management? So because like transactional bank accounts, maybe you should be going to like different countries or different jurisdictions for that. When you're thinking about Switzerland, you are more thinking about wealth management than transactional banking there, because the way that the whole financial system is set up there really provides good asset protection. It's not really, you can find a very good transactional bank there, but maybe that's not the jurisdiction you would go for transactional banking when you have other options out there. Now that we have established the advantages of opening offshore bank account, as well as a couple of drawbacks that you have to think about, let's go through the process of how to open the bank account. So the first thing you have to think about is like, where are you opening the bank account? And basically, if you go through your goals, you can really like narrow it down to a couple of jurisdictions, and then just reach out to the banks. So the next step is choosing the bank. And the bank, there are a couple of questions I usually ask for the bank. The one thing is like how secure they are. Do they have insurance? It also depends on the country, like the legal requirements in the country. Will my assets be protected there? Will my money be protected there? This is the next question and the next step you have to take in this journey. Once you have established and made a decision with the bank, the next thing is to make sure that you have all the documents, and these documents start from your passport, proof of address, another bank statement, or like any kind of source of income document that you can provide. Usually they require this to be notarized and or certified, and if it's in a foreign language, you need to translate it to their language or English. So these are the items that you have to think about when you're preparing for applying for the bank account. And of course you have to fill in the form. It's usually quite lengthy forms, the application forms that you have to follow through. Submit the application and wait for them to go through the compliance check and the KYC. One other thing that you have to take into consideration is, are you required to maintain certain minimum balance with your new offshore bank? Because there are some countries where you have to have like 1 million, or there are some countries where it's like they don't have a minimum deposit, but if you maintain a certain amount on the balance, they will waiver the fees. So there are lots of different scenarios there that you have to think about. This really depends on like bank by bank case situation. So just check with the bank and follow with their policy. Banking offshore also means that you are obligated to think about a couple of compliance items that maybe you were not thinking about while banking in your home country only. The first one that comes to mind is the FATCA is Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, and you also have a Common Reporting Standard, CRS. These are the legal regulations that impact offshore banking. So basically this means that, for example, FATCA means that the banks are obligated to provide information to the IRS so that the revenue system in the US knows that you hold assets in that bank and what kind of asset they are. And the same goes for the CRS. It's a global standard for pretty much the same, making sure that the information exchange is exchanged between the banks and the proper regulatory organizations and agencies in each country. You also have one big thing that you will hear all the time when you're starting with your bank account opening is AML. So it's anti-money laundering policy that every bank follows, and basically this means that they need to make sure that your money and the any money that you're that goes through your bank account is legal and it's not used to fund any terrorist organizations, or it's not obtained through illegal activity. It's like, don't be afraid, just provide all the information or all the answers to the questions that you hear from the bank and you should be all right. These are reporting requirements that you have to follow when you're banking offshore. Hopefully this video helped you get some clarity on where to start with opening your bank account, but if you need more information, go to nomadcapitalist.com and apply now.